And whereas 15 years ago, Kathy and I both were so ill that we could not walk. Just 4 years after that, on October 24th, 1999, we went to Washington, D.C., and we ran the Marine Corps Marathon, 26.2 miles. Yeah, baby. Thank you.
And we finished.
The same day we started.
Now, bear in mind that we do use the term run very loosely. I believe the winner that day crossed the finish line in 2 hours and 8 minutes. We crossed the finish line in 8 hours and 2 minutes.
We didn't finish last.
No.
We beat the pregnant lady.
Yes, we did. And we beat that lady who was celebrating her 82nd birthday that day.
She was fast.
barely passed her.
Picture this. October 24th, 1999. It was a cool, crisp, clear morning in our nation's capital. As we left the hotel, the sun was just coming up over the Iwo Jima Monument. It was a spectacular sunrise. And as we headed over to the race course, we came over this rise, and all of a sudden, there was a sea of excitement and color as 18,000 runners gathered at the starting line. 18,000 runners. 18,000 little skinny people. And then there was us, and we had no trouble finding each other in the crowd. And there were tens of thousands of people lining the race course. One estimate had 100,000 people out there. It was incredible. The Marine Corps band was decked out in their dress blue uniforms playing patriotic songs. There were hot air balloons flying around. There were media helicopter hovering overhead. The excitement was palpable. I told you I'd get that word right. I have trouble with the word palpable. It was amazing, and it was so hard. 26.2 miles. 8 hours out on the race course. Our muscles started cramping up. We became dehydrated and covered in salt. Our feet began to swell and bleed. We'd get blisters, and they would break, and new blisters would form underneath them. The constant pounding of 8 hours on the pavement crushed my toenails against the tops of my shoes. I knew I was in trouble when my thighs kept rubbing together and my underpants burst into flames.
Good.
Guy behind me kept saying, "I smell smoke." It was so hard. We barely finished. We barely made it across the finish line. We barely made it back to the hotel. And when we did get back to the room, we made the mistake of sitting down. And our bodies just locked up in shock. We couldn't move. We just sat there for like 3 hours and stared at each other. She was on one side of the room, I was on the other. We couldn't move. Finally, she said, "You know, the least you could do is turn on the TV." I said, "You get the remote. I can't move." We didn't know how we were going to get home. It started getting dark. We started getting scared. We finally came up with a plan. We said, if the sun comes up in the morning and we are still sitting here, we'll call down to the lobby, tell them, "Come on up and get the luggage, and oh, by the way, there's going to be a couple of extra large bags to deal with." When we finally did get home, the first thing I had to do was go to the podiatrist to have my toenails removed. Then I went to the proctologist to have my head removed. What was I thinking, that I could run a marathon? She puts up with a lot from me, doesn't she? In closing, I would like to tell you one more story about that marathon. This is a pretty amazing story. As we crossed the finish line, the Marine Corps Commandant put the finishers' medals around our necks. We were pretty proud. But that's when Kathy put it in perspective for me. You see, all this time I thought we were just running a race. She showed me that we were living our lives in the moment. As we crossed the finish line, Kathy pulled a piece of paper out of her pocket. It was old and tattered, and as she unfolded it, I recognized it. as her chemotherapy schedule from 4 years before. She had kept it all that time. And I will never forget the day the doctor gave it to her, because it was a 6-month calendar with over 50 medical appointments listed on it. And I'll never forget how she just stared at it, and tears welled up in her eyes. And she looked up at me and she said,
"How am I going to do this? How am I going to get through all of this?"
And I felt so helpless. All I could do was hold her and tell her that we were just going to show up one day at a time. And I got to tell you, folks, those were the hardest 6 months of our lives. There were times when she didn't think she was going to make it. There were times when I didn't think she was going to make it. I've never seen anyone so ill. The worst times were the middle of the night, when we would be sound asleep, it'd be pitch black, and all of a sudden she would just sit straight up in bed, sweat pouring off of her bald head, and she'd just cry, "Please, God, just make the pain stop." And I felt so helpless. All I could do was hold her. But then a miracle occurred. The sun came up in the morning, and she made it through the night. And then the next day, the sun came up again. And somehow she made it. By the grace of God, she survived. And there we were, 4 years later, standing on the finish line of our marathon. And she took that chemotherapy schedule and she tore it into little pieces.
I did, drama queen here. I had been planning this finish for the longest time. I had saved that chemotherapy schedule, and I took it and tore it into as many little pieces as I could, and I threw them in the air, and I said, "Roger, we just took back everything that cancer tried to take away from us. Today I understand what it means to be a survivor. Today I understand that the race belongs not just to the swift and the strong, but also to those of us who just keep running."
Folks, we are all survivors. In one way or another, we are all survivors. We've all been beaten by the cruel winds of fortune and fate.
And as we leave here tonight, we'd like to ask simply that you allow our story to serve as a gentle reminder to live every moment of your life in the moment.
Work hard at maintaining your sense of humor.
Find your own personal marathon, whatever it might be, and finish it.
And laugh every day.
And I like to close with my favorite quotation from the educator Patrick Overton. "When you come to the edge of all the light you know and are about to step off into the darkness of the unknown, faith is knowing that one of two things will happen. There will be something solid for you to stand on, or you will be taught how to fly." And ladies and gentlemen, sometimes we get very lucky, and both of those things happen. The Norma F. Frame Breast Care Center has given you something very solid to stand on. And with that kind of support, that kind of care, and that kind of love, we can all fly. You can fly.
Thank you. God bless you. Thank you for having us. We appreciate it so much. Please take care of yourselves. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's great. Thank you. Thank you.